Good morning, Mr. Mabika. You're welcome. Mr. Mabika, if you can hear me, kindly unmute yourself so we can be sure that our mics are working.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. You're welcome.
Good morning. Hello.
Good morning, sir. Go ahead.
Yes, how are you?
Fine, sir.
Good. Yeah, I'm one of the moderators for this session. I just wanted to quickly check sound and other things.
Great.
You can hear me. You can hear me clearly, right?
Yeah, I can hear you clearly. So, am I assigning co-hosts to you?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I'm doing that immediately.
I can share my screen.
Good. Done.
Great.
We're
Thanks.
expecting
And,
how many?
this is Akinbo.
Correct, sir.
Okay, great. Yeah, I was just checking so that I don't mispronounce your name. A colleague of mine should be joining shortly. His name is Carlos. I think we'll also make him co-host.
Okay.
And our session starts in about 8 minutes, right?
Yes, it does.
Okay, great. Let me just put my holding slides.
Okay.
One moment. You can see that clearly, right?
Yes, I can see that clearly.
Okay, good. Let me just quickly check my video.
Okay.
Just in case we may want to stop share and then I'll put my video on. You can see me, right?
Yes, I can see you.
Okay.
I like your top. It's customized. Internet Society.
Yeah, yes. Thank you. And that's my backyard. That's just behind my house. So you can see that I also have a beautiful house. Huh?
Whoa. Awesome.
I'm joking.
Awesome.
That's one of those Zoom backgrounds that I have there. So that's not my house, but yeah, sometimes it adds up. Especially if you are having a relaxed meeting, sometimes it adds to that. All right, I'll just stop my video for now and just check on my other colleague to see if he's on time and stuff. Yeah.
Oh, great. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. No, thank you for the support and for coming in quite early. It makes things much easier.
Sure. We do all the test run. We do all the gisting. If possible, go for a swim before we start the meeting.
Yes, exactly. All right. Thanks. Let me just check on my colleague.
Okay. Welcome, Carlos. Carlos Rey-Moreno, welcome. You can hear me. Can we quickly check your mic?
Hello, Carlos.
Hi everyone, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yeah, clear.
Yes, Carlos, how are you? How are you, Carlos?
I'm good.
Yes, I think your audio is much better now.
Yes.
How is homework?
Good. It took me a bit to find the way in this session,
but
I found it. It's okay. It's okay.
Okay.
Right on time.
That's fine. I sent right on time. I sent you the link on email, but I think maybe you had already found your way in. Akimbo, can you make Carlos a co-host? So in case Carlos, you may want to share anything. So it's just the three of us for now, and Akimbo is the technical support, and we have two speakers. So from any time from now, maybe we may start to see people trickling in. While it's to wait for the people to join in, Carlos, the plan ahead was that first, depending on the participants and also the connectivity, I'm able to share my video. I did try. Unfortunately, I couldn't get the banner, but just a quick test. You can see me, right? So that if it's distracting, please let me know. I can always change the background and put another one.
That's so much you. If I have to picture you with some background, that would be the background I would picture you with. So it's not distracting. It's just Berengai being Berengai. You know, if you want the full package, Berengai comes with this background. That's fine. It's
yes.
is what it is, right?
It is what it is. Yes. I see that we have one participant who have just joined us.
Do I need to put my video on as well, Berengai? I don't have background in anything, but anything. Anyway, hi.
Yeah.
Much more boring. My computer doesn't allow me to be on the beach for some reason.
Well, this is my backyard, so this is just my home. So
You've managed to bring the beach to Harare. It's good. I'm sure Zimbabwe will appreciate that ocean coastal component of it.
No, that's fine. Yeah, I see there's Hussein who has just joined us. Hussein, how are you?
And thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, we are just doing a quick check, technical check and sound check and stuff, while it's to wait for participants to join us. So in the next 5 to 10 minutes, we'll start our session. If you don't mind, you can remain connected. It's not much of a problem.
No problem. Take your time.
Okay, good.
Hi, Carlos. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Yourself?
Hi.
So, Carlos, I have a quick banner that I have. Well, it's not a banner. It's my Carlos. Do you plan to use PowerPoint at any time? Okay, good. So in that case,
I was thinking making the session rather informal around questions and answers, and like presenting some things and pointing to some resources on the chat maybe, and then really answering questions and be here for people.
Great. So what I'll do, I think I'll just start with a quick overview. I think 2 or 3 slides, a quick overview of the issues that we are going to discuss, and then we open it up to rest of participants to ask questions and stuff. I see other colleagues that have also joined. Dawit, thank you for joining. Joanne, also thank you for joining. Afi, thank you for joining. We are just waiting for more colleagues to join in, and then we can start our session. We are also just doing a quick sound and technical check. So please let us know if you need anything. We do have Akimbo, a colleague from AUC, who is helping us with all the support that we may need. So let me just pause and organize my 2-3 slides.
Afi, Edo, if you're online, please signify. Afi, co-host, please signify.
Hey, Akim, I can hear you.
Oh, good. So I'm going to have to do something just because of technical glitches I've come across in the past. I'm going to make you host, and then you can, make me host. Sorry. I'm going to make you host. I'm transferring the host to you, Afi, and then you can make me host back again. There's a need for that. Are you ready?
Yes.
Good. Done.
Okay, let me make you host back.
Oh, hold on. Hold on, Afi. Make me co-host before you make me host.
Okay.
Good.
Can I make you host now?
Yes, you can. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Members, panelists, moderators, good morning. If you're ready, please just tell us so that we can start the recording.
Thank you, Akimbo. Yes, I think let's give it 2 more minutes, see if we can get more people to join in, and then we get started.
Okay, sir. Okay, moderators, should we go ahead?
Yes, please. Let's go ahead and let's get started. One moment. Let me quickly share my screen. You have started recording, right? Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, great. I think we can get started since we're just about 10 minutes over time. So let me start by introducing myself. One moment, let me activate my video. I'll activate my video shortly. Good morning, colleagues. Good afternoon. I don't think it's afternoon for any participants here, but depending on where you are, greetings from Zimbabwe. My name is Verengai Mabika. I'm based in Harare, Zimbabwe, and I'm the Senior Policy Advisor for Africa with the Internet Society. And thank you very much for joining this session organized on the sidelines of the Africa IGF. So this is one of the active discussion sessions that we have. I think this morning there are about 5 other sessions that are going on, and I'm very happy that you have decided to join this particular one, and I hope that it will be as exciting and as informative as possible. So in this session, we are going to focus on policy and regulation perspectives with regards to community networks, and I will also attempt to describe a bit for those that are new to the concept of community networks, what this subject is all about. And with me, I have my colleague, Carlos Rey-Moreno, who is the co-lead of local networks and policy and strategy with the Association for Progressive Communications. Colleagues, Carlos is a good friend and also an expert in this field, and we have decided to bring this session to participants to interact with you, but most importantly to also talk about an important aspect that we think might steer your interest in the subject of community networks. So this session is co-organized by Internet Society and Association for Progressive Communications. And we also want to thank, of course, the African Union Commission, PRIDA project that is bringing the 2020 edition of the Africa IGF, Africa Internet Governance Forum. And for the first time, at least for me, we are having this session online, of course, due to the challenges that we had during the course of this year with the COVID-19 pandemic. So I'm hoping that this session will be very fruitful. And the way we have structured this session with Carlos is that it's going to be more of an interactive session. We have not prepared anything specific, but myself and colleague we have a bit of experience working with policymakers and regulators in the subject of community networks and telecoms and internet policy. So we would be very much interested in also hearing your views, issues that you think may be of concern with regards to these issues. What also happened that was quite unfortunate is that today, later in the day, I think in the next few hours, we also do have the Africa virtual summit on community networks, which is also expanding on these issues. So for those that may be interested to have a deeper understanding and a deeper discussion on those issues, please let me know, and we also share the details with you so that you can you can connect with the other colleagues there. So just a quick, for our colleagues who are not very familiar with the subject of community networks, I prepared just a 2-3 slides just to look at, to put this into perspective. And yeah, for Africa, I think this is quite key and quite critical, especially in light of the pandemic that we had this year. So you may know that when COVID happened the beginning of this year, there was a very big there was a big demand, a big interest for telecom regulators to find ways of connecting most of the communities that are still not connected, simply because of the nature in which we do business. The social distancing sort of forced us to find new ways, of looking at how we do business. And one of the things that was critical is the aspect of education, for example. And most schools have to be closed. People have to stay stay at home. Most companies had to shut down as well, and most importantly, people still had to communicate. So this sort of exposed the gap, the connectivity gap that we do have in Africa. And of course, we know that about 45% of the world is still not connected. But if you come down to Africa, I think this number is even much bigger. I think we have just connected about 30% of Africans. So if you look at the gap of 70%, it's quite a huge gap that really needs a new way of thinking, new connectivity models and stuff like that. So this is where the aspect of community networks is coming in. So broadly speaking, community networks are defined as telecommunications infrastructure that are deployed and operated by citizens to meet their own communication needs. So here we are looking at community-based solutions, and this is not very new for Africa. I think the rest of Africa, this kind of solutions coming from communities, we have seen this happening in different sectors, in agriculture, in water solutions, in energy solutions. I think these are some of the issues that we have seen communities coming together, putting their minds together, and putting also resources together and to make sure that they address a particular problem. So the idea of community networks is doing the same thing, but this time around just in the connectivity and bringing connectivity and internet to the local community. We find in Africa that most of the community networks are very active in hard to reach areas, rural areas, or even remote areas. So we have close to about 30 to 38 community networks that are very active in Africa, still operational, and these are scattered across countries in Africa, in Nigeria, in Kenya, in Zimbabwe, in South Africa, and there are also new community networks that we are seeing coming up in other areas like Ghana, in Ethiopia, for example. The discussion is going quite wide and trying to address this important gap that we have seen in the connectivity and infrastructure in our continent. So coming closer to the discussion for today, we decided to focus more on the policy and regulatory perspectives or issues related to community networks. And in our discussion today, we want to explore and also sort of hear my colleague and I will also share some examples of what we are seeing in terms of the policy changes that are happening in those countries that are trying to promote the deployment of community networks in their countries. We also discuss issues to do with how to build such communities, and building those communities, of course, the policy aspect also comes into play. How do we really engage with those policymakers, with those regulators, to make sure that they understand the need and the importance of this particular aspect? So in our policy and regulatory discussion, I think a few things that may be important or necessary to think about. Here we are looking at issues to do with registration or permitting these community networks to operate. We are also looking at are there any discussions around taxes or regulatory licenses or input licenses or license fees. Here we know that a community network, being a telecoms service provider, they definitely need equipment that is coming from elsewhere, from other countries. Is there any are there any options, or are we thinking about such options to making sure that the equipment that they are importing is much cheaper or sometimes subsidized by government? So we can also, if you have any questions around those issues or case studies that we have seen around those issues, please also take that in. You can also take that in mind. So financing, and then of course last, access to spectrum. And of course, my colleague is also a specialist in that area. He may share any experiences with regards to those issues. So generally, this is the kind of discussion that we want to have with regards to community networks. So before I open it up to the floor, maybe let me just invite here Carlos, in case you have a few words to say with regards to the points that I've mentioned, or anything related to the subject. Carlos, please.
Sorry, guys. Thank you for that introduction. And maybe before, because sometimes it really does depend who is on the session around, besides your questions and whatnot, which topics we could go in one direction or go in another direction. And if we are, as we are so few people here, maybe we can spend some time getting to hear from you, who you are, where are you calling from, what is your interest in this session, and which of the topics that that Berenguer introduced you would like us to go a bit deeper into. We are really here to present this for you, right? And you've taken the time to attend this session. So really, we want to know what you want to know. So if that's okay with everyone, I mean, it's I really would like to hear from the few of you that are with us today. So maybe, I don't know, Akimbo, if you want to introduce yourself and tell us a bit, besides being part of the technical team, if you have any interest on any of the topics that Berenguer mentioned. No? Okay, Afi?
Dafi from Togo, and I'm a co-host for this session. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Nice to hear you again, Afi.
Nice to see you too.
Dawit, is there anything in particular that you would like to know about this session?
I want to know more about community network in Africa and how we can help.
Okay. Dawit?
Well, I wanted to know about everything, but I think it's important that there is cooperation between various organizations and countries around this issue, because it's relatively new and especially regulators and so on are not used to discussing these kind of issues. And I think it's important to learn from each other's experiences. For example, as you know, Carlos, we had some work that we have done with with the regulator here in Ethiopia. That was a very good experience because the regulator didn't know anything about community networks when it started. And now we have made some changes. Not only they know about it, but they support it. So I think it's important that we share those experiences because other countries are going through the same process. And I think it's better that they learn from those who have passed through that.
Thanks a lot, Dawit. And really, I mean, I would like to go a bit deeper into the case of Ethiopia that we may learn so much from and all your conversations there. Herman, do you mind sharing a bit about you and your interest in this particular conversation, or something that you would like us to elaborate into?
Good morning. Hello.
Hello, Herman. We can hear you. We can hear you.
So basically, my name is Herman Ramos. I'm from Mozambique. I've been working with at Global Education. Basically, we use technological innovation to increase like people's life. And we are now developing mobile healthcare to provide early diagnosis. But as we want to implement these kinds of projects in rural areas, and we are facing many challenges in rural areas, because even if we want to provide, for example, a mobile healthcare, we can see that many people from rural areas don't have access to internet. And then at some point, even this application is not inclusive. So that's why we're interested on community networks, and to see how we can use community networks to allow more inclusion. And I'm also particularly interested in know what are the most common challenge that you face in engaging with governments around the world.
Okay.
In this case. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. And I like your picture with Daniel there. It's a very dear friend as well. Joanne, can you tell us a bit about yourself and your interest in the session? Okay, Joanne might not be here with us at the moment. Tuahir, do you mind sharing a bit about yourself and what do you, I mean, from everything you know already, what in particular you would like to know or get out from this session, right?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, my name is Tuahir Hussein. I'm from Kenya. A rural
Your line seems to be breaking a bit, Tuahir.
Actually, sorry, I was actually interrupted by a phone call.
Okay. Then go ahead, please.
Okay, I run a digital hub which I'm concentrating in actually as a connecting schools. My focus is actually as a covering the digital divide, but the way I'm handling it so for starters is I'm trying to as I go through actually what I look at as the 3D dimensional problem of the digital divide, which I've divided it into as a digital literacy, digital devices, and connectivity. So right now I'm actually as I'm more focused on digital literacy, but at the same time I'm actually trying to connect some few schools. That's why I'm actually here today, as to try and see how we can connect those schools in a very in a more sustainable and affordable way. Thank you. I hope to learn more from you, Carlos and Berengai. Thank you.
Thank you, Twahir. And maybe this connects to what Herman was saying before and how, Twahir has been starting different, not only the ICT hubs, but different other processes in Kenya. And there, those type of, okay, so let me step back a second and go back to what maybe Dawit was saying around how new this concept is. And this concept is new for people who want to implement them and who see that that there are places where connectivity doesn't exist and where there is a real need of extending it and extending it affordably, as is the case of Herman. But it is also new for policymakers and regulators who have been dealing with an industry that looked completely different 10 years ago than what it looks like now. And on that one, we are moving from a sector that was regulated around national companies, in many cases state-owned monopolies, who owned everything and operated everything from the landing station of the fiber optic cables and the terrestrial stations of the satellites to get the internet in and out of the country, to that had to do all the infrastructure in the country, all the backbone, all the access, all the last mile, and to a situation now where there is already quite a lot of fiber in many countries. I mean, not obviously as much as we would like to, but definitely quite a lot. I think I can look for the figure, but the number of fiber kilometers in Africa is only increasing and is quite big. And where the technologies are coming down on price and on complexity, you can definitely set up a Wi-Fi hotspot, connect to a fiber point of presence wherever, extend the connectivity and set up Wi-Fi connectivity for really a handful of, like maybe less than, I don't know, $1,000, or it depends on how far you are from the points of presence, right? But not the millions that needed to be invested like 10 years ago. So the ecosystem is changing, and it's changing very quickly, but yet the mindset of most people and the mindset of the regulators and the policymakers remain stuck on only a handful of companies can do this. And hence the policy and regulatory space is, or the frameworks are created for such a space where a handful of big companies were able to do everything, no? And you see that on the cost of the spectrum, you see that on the type of operators licenses that you get. But before getting into those details, also going back to what Dawit was mentioning around education and around awareness. I think something that we are doing and we keep on doing and we need to keep on doing is raising that awareness. The Internet Society and APC that do that through these sessions and through sessions like the one today at 12 UTC that I invite all of you to join. Is gonna focus the one today in the particular aspects of like in APC we consider 5 elements of an enabling policy and regulatory framework for community networks that are operator licensing, access to spectrum, access to backhaul, access to finance, and transparency on the telecommunications data. And I will go through the 5 of them if you have interest on them. But the session today at 12 on the virtual summit on community networks that is taking place, as I say, at 12 UTC, is going to be looking at the access to financing, at the public funding of community networks, which we believe is a critical and timely topic, given how much the public financing is going to be stretched in a post-COVID scenario. And we are going to have 3, well, we're going to have a speaker from the Ghanaian Universal Service and Access Fund. We are going to have an expert from South Africa who had been doing his PhD, particularly around universal service funds. And we are going to have a former member of the Universal Service Agency in Lesotho. And I believe it's going to be very interesting. So if you want to look into understanding a bit more that component of access to funding or to public funding, the session is going to be quite interesting. And I do invite all of you to join. And maybe just to dwell a bit on that one, right? So, because that particular existence of the Universal Service Fund is critical to understand the whole, how can I say, the whole problems that we are discussing or that we are trying to deal with. And is in most countries, pretty much in all of them, there is a levy, there is a tax that is charged to operators in order to finance the provision into rural and remote areas. And that comes with the understanding that connecting urban areas and wealthy areas is much easier and profitable than what it is to connect hard to reach areas and remote areas. So you do have most countries collecting this levy that then it is used to subsidize the connectivity in those other areas. And in most cases, the access to that financing can only be accessed by those who are contributing to that fund, which in itself is a bit contradictory. But anyway, sorry, I'm just going a bit all over the place, and I wanted just to touch on financing a bit to maybe tease you into attending the session this afternoon, because I do strongly believe that is going to be super enriching. I'm really looking forward to that. Maybe because I know more about the other 4 components than what I know about financing and access to public funding, and I'm really looking forward to that one. But going back to the question that Herman was asking on how, and maybe to give the word to Dawit afterwards, how to engage with governments and how to raise awareness to governments, right? And the approach that Dawit was mentioning about Ethiopia is something that the Internet Society and APC have been following for the last 3 years or so, because we understood that we were somehow criticizing that the policies and regulations were favoring those big players that had little interest many times on providing affordable connectivity in rural areas. But at the same time, well, there are many ways to engage with government, but the public way of engaging with governments and regulators is through public consultations. And public consultations are a mechanism that most regulators are obliged to use when they are changing laws or changing regulations. And that is that they would put out a draft framework for whatever. It can be for TV white spaces, it can be for operators licensing, it can be for, in the case of Ethiopia, the latest was about the Universal Service Fund framework. And they request comments from the public, right? And if you look at the comments from the public from consultations from 5 years ago, 100% of the contributions to those consultations were coming from the private sector only. So actually, when changing those drafts or when incorporating changes to those drafts, you could have policymakers and regulators with a very good public service mindset that still they had to accommodate the recommendations from the private sector into their policies and to their regulations, and they didn't get to hear the voices of other actors. So what we are doing is engaging quite actively into we monitor and we every time we identify a regulator that is putting out a request for comments from the public, we do set up a coalition. It starts by members from APC and ISOC talking together, and well, sometimes it comes from the people in the country itself, and other times it's us who identify it, and then we engage with the organizations that we know in that given country and put together a coalition that then work into providing input in that particular public consultation. I'm sharing a link on the chat of the different countries and processes where we've put together such a coalition. And so far, besides the case of Ethiopia, that I'm going to stop talking now, and I really want Dawit to tell us a bit more about that particular process. And we have had, I would say, a great success in doing something similar in Uganda. We engaged in the public consultation that the Ugandan Communication Commission put out last year about their licensing framework, and we submitted input around the need to create a space for community networks in the regulatory framework, and they came out with a reform operator licensing framework, which included a category for communal licenses, right? So we can pinpoint to our participation in those spaces and the participation of anyone from civil society in those spaces to a more enabling regulatory framework. Is not easy. It's not, like it doesn't guarantee success, but it's something definitely that contributes to that effort. No? So please, if you don't mind, Dawit, to elaborate a bit more on Ethiopia and on what went well and what went wrong. Obviously, your engagements there went a bit beyond the public consultations in order maybe to give Herman some hints about what the steps could be on that regard, on setting up meetings, and maybe from there.
Okay, happy to do that.
A bit more about the whole process. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. Thank you, Carlos. I'm happy to do that. So maybe I will say something very general, and then I will talk more, I think, specifically about what we did in Ethiopia. So in general, when you want to change things in the policy or regulatory area, it generally takes time, especially when it's something that is considered as revolutionary, which is the case of community networks. people don't even know the name, let alone what it means. So it's considered as completely outside what they know. I remember that was a case a long time ago with free and open source software, where people were saying, well, this is not serious. You cannot really have software that people use when there's no company ownership behind it. We have seen today that open source softwares are really everywhere, and they are trusted. They are, as good and sometimes better than proprietary software. The same thing with community networks. People are used to having telecommunication operation only delivered by private companies, or in the case of Ethiopia, one big government company. And it's very difficult for them, even those who are holding big responsibilities, to imagine that the community can do this kind of work. So we have the whole perception against us. Therefore, what I believe works is, first, you have to convince yourself that this is important, that there is a cause to fight for. And I think this is what we have done at APC and ISOC. We are convinced that this is important, that we need to put our time and effort behind it, because it really is important for our vision. So I think that is important. If you are not convinced, you cannot convince others. Then you have to understand that it takes a long time. It's not something that you work on for 6 months and you go away. We know that it takes years, and sometimes you don't see the needle moving, and it might seem discouraging, but we have also seen that there are some successes and more successes as we go forward. So the first thing that we have done in Ethiopia is to talk about it, because not many people knew about it. So we had some workshops here and there. We find some curious people who want to know more about it. And we talk informally with government and regulators at whatever opportunity we find, so that people are aware about it. And then we waited for the right moment, or the right moment came to us. And that was when we had the reform of the whole telecommunication sector. As some of you might know, Ethiopia was under government monopoly in the telecom sector until June 2019, when a law was passed to liberalize the sector, which is much later than in other countries. But that law really allowed the establishment of a regulator for the sector, and the regulator had to develop a number of directives for the sector. I think there will be 21 in total. And as Carlos said, they are obliged to have public consultations. And the directives came without any mention of community networks or anything that would allow community networks to function in that environment. So it was discouraging when we saw the first drafts. But were not discouraged. And fortunately, we had partnerships. APC is working closely with us, but other organizations as well. We had a local chapter and other organizations. So very quickly, we created a coalition that discussed on the first regulations, draft regulations, draft directives that, and we submitted comments. For a very long time, we didn't hear back, but we continue to comment on each new draft because it was all the regulatory environment that is being established. So we commented on those who are directly related to what we wanted to achieve. And just last week, there was a meeting to discuss about the comments. And I was very happy that the regulator has taken that very positively and is going to consider community networks and create really good enabling environment for community networks. And this could not happen without us, being involved. Sometimes it was, it required, well, they gave us 15 days, and sometimes we don't know about it a week later. So we had sometimes basically 1 week to do the work. It puts a lot of pressure, but we knew that it was a unique opportunity. We put the effort and time on it, and it was, rewarding because I don't think this would happen unless we did that, because there was nobody else who could do it. Therefore, my advice for others who are going through the same process is that you have to have a coalition ready. You have to learn about it, to do small things that are allowed within your country, even in an environment that is not enabling at the moment. And there will be some time. There will be an opportunity, and it's not only in Ethiopia, but we have seen it in other countries. Regulators have to go through public consultations, and you have to use those opportunities to create those environments. I'm sorry for being long, but I hope that you have got the picture of what happened in Ethiopia.
No, thanks, Dawit. That was precisely what we wanted, and I think part of the question that, or well, what Herman wanted to know a bit more about. I don't know, Herman, if there is anything you want to elaborate a bit more on the concept of Mozambique or how to go forward. It is true that in Mozambique in particular, the regulator is rather progressive, and there are people within the regulator that are very open to, well, radical ideas, as Dawit was saying. It's probably one of the most progressive regulators in the continent. And if you do want to experiment or do something, please let us know and contact us. You have our details, and we can introduce you to people there. Anyway, can you elaborate a bit more, Herman?
Yeah, basically, since last year, I think we have the regulation for the use of TV white space. Now I'm trying to because I was only focused on technological innovation, not focused on communities, community networks, and regulatory process. So I'm now trying to interact. I have a meeting with one of responsible for that make part of the regulatory institution to understand more. We also have an organization related to the regulatory that provides financial project related to connectivity in rural areas. So basically, I'm trying to engage with them and have conversations to understand more about the whole process in this case.
Great, great. As said, looking forward to support you on that one. Maybe moving a bit forward on that. Something that is also important, I think, when engaging with governments and to have documentation ready for being able to respond on those sometimes 7 days or 10 days or whatever sort time framework that we have for attending to public consultations is and in order to, how can I say, sound less radical, if we want to keep on using that word, is to show that other countries have also taken the step into any direction, right? So when we went into Ethiopian consultation, into the Ethiopian public consultation, in Uganda, in the context of Africa, but there are other countries around the world who have created community network licensing clauses for in the regulatory frameworks, right? And have all those best practices ready is also very, very important. I'm sharing there with you on the chat as well one publication that we've put together this year for the Global Symposium for Regulators, in which we do analyze for the 5 elements that I was mentioning at the beginning, the different barriers that we have identified and that we were able to cluster around what community networks are experiencing in the countries we work with, or with the community networks we work with, as well as how some countries have addressed them, and therefore pointing to some best practices internationally that that would help regulators in looking at ways of addressing those barriers. And again, like, it's always difficult to be a pioneer or to be the first one to do something, but when there has been others doing that, we envision that that it will be easier, right? It's not probably it would have been difficult for Ethiopia to do it if Uganda wouldn't have done it, and now that there is Uganda and Ethiopia, it would be much easier for others to do it, and so on and so forth, right? I believe there are going to be interesting changes in Kenya coming soon, and in other countries, hopefully. I don't know if there is any Nigerian in the room. At the moment, we have identified, and we need to start looking at contribution to a public consultation in Nigeria about the draft framework that they have put out around 5G. And with that one, I want to move on into a spectrum and why a spectrum is so important around policy and regulation. So while I look for the link for the Nigerian consultation, if anyone wants to take the mic and ask any question, feedback, or like comment on their experience, is more than welcome.
Contribution, Akimbo Adebumi for the transcript. May I go ahead?
Absolutely, please go ahead.
Okay, my name is Adebumi Akimbo. I'm a member of ISOC. That's why I felt I should allow Bekele to talk before me. I've been opportuned to have received trainings and do research as an ISOC member. I also authored the NEBS proposal, which is the Nigerian Educational Broadband Spectrum. This is to ensure that community networks not just in Nigeria, but in Africa, are giving the much needed attention because basically the service provider assumes that he won't be able to make profit when he sets so much infrastructure within a rural area. That is one. Two, the opportunity the average rural dweller has to get a phone that's actually up to date with the standard of modern communication, which is, of course, Android instead of the CDMA. And so because of these two challenges, the service provider believes that he or she would be at a loss. But this is where community network stands to gain. And some years back, I was opportuned to have started what we referred to as telecenters. Telecenters were more or less like cyber cafes, but the difference between a telecenter and a cyber cafe is that you don't go to check your mail and other things just because you want to, but you go there for particular training, which of course the telecenter manager has to put you through. So if you have come to add more value to yourself on fashion, he or she will be able to channel you to sites that are related to fashion and how to, probably get the better part of the internet as at that time. Telecenters have now metamorphosized into, personal training based on the fact that we have more equipment to use. You don't have to go out and look for a telecenter. So I was opportune to start the first hub in Nigeria. I don't know, maybe it's in Africa, but the first hub in Nigeria, when we started it, basically it was to, make people come in. And today we classify them as community networks. We have remodeled and called ourselves community net hubs. And the reason why we are doing that is what has brought this discussion, which is more community networks across the world, especially in Africa, need to come together and begin to look at the challenges each and every one of us has faced, especially when we're talking about government side. And so when we started, when I wrote the National Educational Broadband Spectrum, my idea was that if government begins to pay more attention, then probably the service provider would get waivers to encourage them to ensure that this is done irrespective of the economy in the rural sector. And there's a domino effect if this comes to bear. There is a domino effect. The more people that are empowered to understand how to function in a digital era, the more the digital economy would increase, thereby affecting the national growth and development, which is good for everyone, even looking at the Sustainable Development Goals. So moving forward, one of the things I would want us to focus more that can actually make us survive when we're talking about community networks is looking at the policy and begin to speak to the policy as a group, not as individuals. When you say you're a member of social group all over Africa, all over the world, and you are proposing this that because it has been tested somewhere and it has affected the economy, then you begin to look at, yes, this is a more adoptable approach to ensure that our own community or country also benefit. Take countries doing so wonderfully well just because they have free Wi-Fi almost everywhere. Recently, some of my groups have been, discussing that we should do more research, and I think this can also apply to other countries. More research on the availability of hotspots area in the country and marking them. If you can get as much as possible, then you could actually tell your government it has done a good job by giving waivers to encourage free Wi-Fi centers across the country. But if it doesn't, you can always use that research proposal to talk to government and talk to policy. So I think our first basic attention should be policy, should be platform, which is coming together, and then policy, which is how to ensure that the service provider's interest is safeguarded, the government's interest to an extent is safeguarded, and especially the people's interest is safeguarded. Note that if you concentrate too much of attention on the urban area, the people in the rural area would come. Now, your planning was to ensure that 50 people get good benefit from that infrastructure. But at the end of the day, because you have not taken care of the rural area, the percentage would increase. So you have 40, you plan for 50, by the end of the day, you have 100. And that would have distorted destroyed your whole planning. So thank you for giving me the floor.
Thank you
very much.
Akimbo. Berengai, do you want to comment?
Well, I just wanted to raise a few things. Firstly, just the time. So we have to take note of the time. We are just left up with about 20 minutes. So for colleagues, I want to encourage you to raise your questions if you have. If you haven't gotten an opportunity to speak, please raise your hand, or you can just get the mic and also share your experiences. But also just to say, for the few questions that I noted in the chat, firstly from our colleagues from Kenya that have an interest in starting an initiative, a community network initiative. We also do have colleagues, in fact, about 2 or 3 community networks that are operating in Kenya. And I would encourage you to also reach out maybe after this session, so that we can share the details of what's happening in Kenya. I think it's much easier for you to connect with people who are already on the ground, to give you ideas, share with you the obstacles that they've encountered, and also just to speed up some of the things that you may want to have. But let me pause there and open the floor to other colleagues who have joined, or others that may want to raise any questions. Anyone?
Maybe Berengai, just to get back to Akimbo as well as to Ahir, and then we give the floor to Kosi, who has raised his hand.
Yes, Carlos,
just to get back to Akimbo, as I was saying, there is this draft policy for 5G, who the Nigerian. I'm gonna mute you, Kosi. I will give you the floor just now. So CTAD, which is an APC member, is going to put together a one-day workshop I believe in the next 2 weeks, where presentations are going to be made around 5G and a similar coalition or platform to submit comments to this draft framework from the Nigerian Competition Commission is going to be put together. So if you have interest into engaging in that platform, that is definitely going to discuss a spectrum for rural areas, and 5G is definitely the next place where contention is going to take place around allocation of a spectrum. I would definitely invite you to contact me or contact CTAD or Yunusa, who maybe you know by now, the executive director from CTAD, who is also working on telecenters and on similar community centers as you were mentioning, to start that platform and that movement and get together on those topics which are so important for Nigeria and for everyone else. And then to answer to Ahir as well, and the question that he posed, for sure, I think digital skills and in rural areas is important. And I think, I'm not saying that I don't want to disregard the importance of it, and it's obviously critical. And I think most of the community networks that started with a focus on solving the connectivity issue, solving the affordability issue, the business model, now they are facing this component that for the business model of a community network to work, those digital skills need to be developed in the rural areas for them to, for users to actually use the network, even though the price is affordable, even, like sometimes people are not aware of the potential benefits of the internet, or even if they are aware, they don't have the skills and the devices to use them. So also connecting to what Akimbo was mentioning, you can see a rebirth of telecenters. You can see a rebirth of, there is a super interesting project in Cameroon at the moment where they are repurposing the telecenters that they had and making them a community network in order to bring a bit more of a community ownership and a community-driven model, because those telecenters were set up in a very top-down fashion, and then they didn't work for the communities and for the needs of the community. So 100% on focusing on literacy and availability of the devices. I think there is a space for renewing the whole telecenter, community center approach, but with a bottom-up approach. I think we have learned that top-down interventions, whether they are from operators or there are from governments or there are from NGOs that do not take into consideration the communities, they die. They have very short legs. So involving the community from the onset and ensuring that they participate in the decision making and in the operation is critical for that focus to have success. Sorry, Kosi, you had your hand up. The floor is yours. But at least I cannot hear you. I'm not sure if you are speaking.
Do you hear me, please?
Yes, now. Please go ahead.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That is very good session. When we talk about community network, there are a lot of idea. My problem in this matter is what is the difference when we are seeing everywhere in our countries, cyber center, community cyber center, and the principle of community network. What is the difference between the two kind of problem we need to resolve? Affordability of internet for everybody, or affordability of internet just for the people who attend cyber center?
Thank you, Kosi. Sorry, Berengai, go ahead, and I have been talking too much.
No, it's fine. What you have been saying is very valuable, and I think we have learned quite a lot there. Just to respond to Kosi's question, I will not attempt to give an answer, but just my personal perspective of the thinking behind all these services and all these new ideas that are coming up. I think primarily for community networks, let me pause and say, I believe that all these services are sort of addressing a particular need and a particular gap in our communities. And I think one of my colleague who wrote in the chat, I think it was saying, who was asking if it's important to start with digital literacy or with the community network first. And you know this, you can relate this to the chicken and egg kind of situation. But primarily speaking, I think that they are addressing two different needs that we have identified in our communities. For community networks, I think the gap is quite huge. We have noted that I think at the moment we have connected just about 30% of the African communities, and 70% are still not connected. And we know for a fact that the internet will bring lots and lots of other opportunities that we even don't know it. If you are not yet using the internet, you may not even know that there are so many benefits. But most importantly, I think to put this into perspective is that the fact that when a community network is establishing or is getting deployed, they also have to look at the use cases that are coming with the community networks. So just speaking from the little experience that I've seen in Africa, I've noted that quite a number of the community networks sort of ride upon another use case that may sort of create that opportunity. For example, in Africa, in the recent years, we have started using what do you call mobile money. Mobile money, for example, has become quite huge. And to a grandmother or someone in rural area, they may not really want the internet, but they want to be able to connect for purposes of, making a transaction or, doing a particular use case that is quite critical in their livelihoods or in their lives. So when we are thinking about community networks, we also need to think of these use cases, because sometimes it's not really important to just connect people for the sake of connection. It has to come with a real need. So a community sometimes identifies that they are not able to be at the same level with the rest of the country in terms of education, especially in this COVID-19. We have seen quite a number of communities, asking to be able to, access education materials. Some are even going beyond that. In Zimbabwe, for example, one of the community network that we have here is using their network to reach out to telemedicine, for example, because we have got a very big shortage of medical personnel, but we do have medical assistants and the nurse aides that we have in communities. And what they simply do is that they connect with a doctor that is seated in the capital city, and as a result, they're able to respond urgently to some of these emergencies. So definitely, of course, I understand that the difference might be there in the sense that a telecom hub or a telecenter may not necessarily be having the connectivity, modalities and stuff, but probably they're saving the necessary need of raising the necessary awareness for people to understand the need and also the benefits of being connected. So definitely what we are seeing is a community network expanding, their services from just the connectivity aspects to other areas that are important for their communities. Let me pause there and check if there's any other questions there, or anyone wants to chip in or add some points. Anyone who wants to take the floor?
Can I, Akibo?
Yeah, please go ahead, Akibo.
Okay, so one way or the other, there is no how we will be talking about community network without talking about the 3 A's, and that's reacting to COSI. There is no way you will do that, but there always has to be a starting point. Remember, if you have a community network like I do in my country, in a rural area, you have to deal with literacy issues. Some can't even read. So the best way is to use language, local dialects. So the second stage is to ensure that at least you have the facility for them to learn. So when the average mind learns how to use, then the average mind would seek how to get. So once they learn how to use, then they will come to the stage of seeking to get applications or equipment to actually be on their own and actually have something to get back or give back. So I think those has to be understood. So the issue of access, affordability, and availability still boils down to the policy. If we get the policy right, we'll get the solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Akimbo. I think those are very interesting points you've just raised there. Colleagues, anyone else? I think we have to round up this discussion in the next 5 minutes to give the opportunity for colleagues to join other sessions. Anyone with a question, idea? Okay. I think we might have exhausted our questions, but this doesn't mean that the discussion is ending here and now. Firstly, for those that may want to expand their knowledge or even understand the funding modalities, especially public funding modalities, again, we will share the link to the session that will happen in the Africa virtual CN Summit session later in the afternoon today. So for those that may want to join, please, I will be sharing the link shortly. And I think Carlos and Dawit, maybe let me just summarize some of the points that I noted here, and I think we can close this session and attend to some other exciting sessions that are ongoing. So the first point that I think was quite clear in this discussion is the fact that the current model that we have in terms of connectivity, the telecom operators that we have, these are the big operators that we have. I think that certainly their focus is more on the business approaches, and they may not necessarily want to deploy their communications to their networks to places where they will not make the necessary profits. Sorry, there's just some noise that coming from the background. Let me. Hello, I hope you can hear me. Sorry, there was some background noise that was just distracting me. I think the second point that I noted is that community networks are sort of coming in as an alternative way of covering that gap that we have noticed, the gap that is probably not going to be filled by the big telecom operators. For a community networks to be able to be deployed, I think there are a number of things that we need to take into consideration. Firstly, the community itself, is they really need, is the community really asking for these services? And yeah, I think it's also important to look at the dynamics, the community dynamics, things like the power structures, the supporters, the beneficiaries themselves. And I think this is where colleagues mentioned things to do with digital literacy. Should you start from the digital literacy first, or you have to start with the network itself? And I think there are also other important issues that were mentioned, especially in line with the topic of discussion today, the policy aspects. Firstly, do our policymakers and governments understand that there's need, and do they really understand that there's an alternative way to connect the unconnected? So there's a big effort that we need to do to raise the necessary awareness with policymakers, but also with our communities that wants to engage. And then I think Dawit and Carlos also mentioned an important aspect of, organizing ourselves into responding to this need when it comes. So the need to establish which other players are important in supporting this need, building the necessary coalition, and responding to the needs when the opportunity arrives. So I think those are some of the aspects that I think came out. Carlos also mentioned a bit on the business models of community networks. Like if you are thinking of deploying a community network, you also need to think of the use cases it comes with. I think that feeds directly into what Hussein has just mentioned, the sustainability aspect of the community network. Once there, how are you going to sustain it? Are there extra services that you can complement the deployment of that CN? So I think these are important aspects that we sort of have shared during this session. And I would like us to round off this discussion by firstly thanking Carlos for taking the time and of course sharing his expertise. Dawit, also sharing your expertise with the process happening in Ethiopia. And of course, the participants, I think you guys were very amazing. It's the group is quite small, and I think it was also quite intimate that we were able to exchange notes. The case studies raised by Akimbo from Nigeria, Ramos from Mozambique, and colleagues from Kenya. I think those were important issues that you have raised. So once again, colleagues, let me say thank you very much for making time to have this discussion. Of course, the discussion is not over. If you have anything that may come to mind after this session, please, you are free to reach out to us. We also do have this session being recorded if you want to just go through it over again and catch up with some of the things that have been discussed. Please do we do have access to the recordings. So once again, thank you very much, and let's meet again in yet another session that's coming up. So thank you, and have a good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a good day all.